So welcome to my presentation. The title is Command Line Reinvented, and of course it's about a Smalltalk application. We control a business application via guided commands. My name is Richard Uttner. I'm working for the Bauingenieur Schmidt company, who is fortunately represented today by its IT leader, Stefan Kersting, and he can manage to attend this presentation or the whole conference for one day. So he will see what we are doing in Smalltalk all the time since 2019 on Faro in this application. So the title was about commands, but what lies below the commands, of course, is use cases. So every application has use cases. In our case, we're talking about the document management systems. We had already presentations in the last years about that. And what does it contain? We have use cases for creating and managing data hierarchies on projects, folders, and documents. We have to deal with identities that are organization and persons who deal with that documents, dealing with projects that are related to that document. We have, of course, also to edit configuration data. We have ways how to display configurations in different ways. And of course, we include also all single operations as use cases that we normally don't even think of, saying, okay, select an item in a hierarchy, or simply mark something or open something. Everything is a use case in our application, and thus we are also talking about commands to execute that use cases. From the technical point of view, I would think of a command editor as something to execute calls, concrete calls. So we make a difference. We could think of opening a document being a command, or we could more precisely say opening a document is a call that has a certain name. It has certain arguments that are the values I have to provide so that I can open a certain document. What you can see in this example here is a call to save the selected document as a release. So the first line is the name of the call. Then we have a variable, a parameter for the call that is assigned with the current single selection. So it's an indirect way to provide a value for the command, or for the call to be precise. And finally, in this case, we assume that we need contents for the saved documents. And it should, in that example, come from a file that has a certain given name. And the name of the file in that case is a literal value, wherever it comes from. And what we can say about commands, or the elements of the commands, the calls, in our application, what you see above is the normal display of the application, a table of some documents with a selected line. And the commands, and command is more than simply the calls, but for our example here, it's mainly the call. They are shown in the dedicated editor pane. And that means in our system, each view has an own command editor that can be shown or hidden, take more space or less space. And what, of course, we need in that approach, the view and the editor have to be connected internally somehow so that it works. So that a certain view, of course, is controlled by a certain command editor. And what we further see, commands are written with help of completion. It means we do not have to type each of the letters that we have here. And what you see below to indicate that is a list of further variables in that case that I could try to specify for the given call. And for a short first impression, let's sum it up like commands consist of a call type and a call call type and call variables to be filled. So the effective execution of this command is executing the call type. And as we always know, it's easy to have an indirect way to specify context when we are executing use cases in an application. Normally, we know we have context menus, even the name contains that expression. So we are trying to get most of our information somehow from the context when we are dealing with something. We have a selected position somewhere in our application, and we try to have a minimum of action buttons or menu items that are active are necessary to execute a certain use case. And in our world, the problem is, if you are talking about a command line, which was the title and the purpose of that command editor, that the main problem is to identify the values for arguments. So in fact, if we open a project, we need a way to identify that project. And this slide shows you 3 ways how we are able to use a command line to specify which project we want to open. First line shows the easy way. That is the visible short ID of our project. The second line shows a way that is specific to our application, because we have, for each item that we can see, we have a so-called item UID that includes a small type prefix and a simple value that is encoded in a base 64 encoding that we are specifically using for that. And the last line shows the classic way how to identify data coming from the disk, which is simply the primary key ID. But of course, people using the application will normally not know these values. So what we in fact did is to create an automatic conversion on the command line to be able to get different, to have different ways to specify the values. That's one thing which is important for understanding the next slides about how do we get our values. What I provided here is an example. Now let's see how that project open call is executed. And to show you how it works, I recorded the typings, and in the right area of the display you see the green overlay showing the characters that actually took to type these commands. So as we have all available variable names and call types as names known by the command line editor, we can easily autocomplete everything immediately after you type. So in fact, for this project open, I had to type 4 keys to get to the point where I can set the constant value, the literal value for the project number, and Control and Enter finally opens the project and executes the command. So that's how we want to deal or how we are dealing with the problem that commands would expect a lot of, or would require a lot of typing to be handled in the application. The next example will get a bit more complicated. We're doing a folder create and a document create call immediately after each other. And here we can show a lot of things that are possible. Again, it's the automatic replay about what we are doing here. So we have, what you can see is how the command line in fact would be shown to the user after he executed two separate commands, folder create, document create. The folder has a given type, that is a specific variable that you can apply to a folder create call if you want to specify that. And below you see some further advantages of a way to use a command line that is strictly driven by auto-completion that exactly limits what you can type. Because the most interesting thing is how we were using how we were setting up the reference item for the document. It's, of course, we want to use the same folder that we just created before as the parent for the new document. And here we have a feature, instead of providing a literal value, we can access values that we already provided before. In that case, it's the last call. The dot separates the point where we can say, okay, now we need to know which type of call we want to reference. Then we get a list of all call types that were executed. Then we choose folder create. And as every call always has a result variable that is automatically filled at its end with a specified result for each type of call, we know, okay, the folder create call, not surprisingly, had a result that was a folder, and that's the one we want to refer to. And for me, the interesting thing is that even in that very rich scenario, we didn't have to type many things. Most of it was auto-completed. And that is our way to deal with complex scenarios to be issued on the command line. When I was talking about types, I didn't talk much about what kind of types we have and how we understand them. As a first impression, I give you a picture where you most probably cannot read anything, even on a high resolution screen. It's not possible to read the whole SVG. It's just meant as an overview. So you can see types in that case play a very important role if we want to really do something that matches precisely the requirements of our application. So when I was talking about a document management application, we can think of that we have a type like document, folder, project. We were talking about identities that are persons and organizations. And it sums up to a lot of things, especially as all of the values that carrying semantics, like we had a folder type, that the folder is a separator, that is also finally not as an arbitrary string saying separator, but it's a folder type. And so we have also document types and so on, and that leads to a big amount of types. And here I gave you a cutout. This SVG is automatically generated by our framework because it has a knowledge of the type hierarchy. It can traverse it and print it with an automatically derived relationship between the types, where we even can see, okay, which types can be transformed automatically in other types. And that is especially important. Then that knowledge is not necessarily typical for people who just use the commands interactively, but it's more important for people who use our calls via a JSON API, because that's also what we support. Another advantage we are really liking to use in the meantime is that those commands are not only accessible via direct keyboard input, of course they are also accessible via a remote API. And here comes the JSON representation again. We have even one more feature that we are using really much, that is creating call instances with certain setup values by scripting tests, where we can issue a series of commands just to see if everything works still. So instead of having unit tests that is only for the basis elements of things like parser and type conversion and things like that, we can also use tests to be executed from Faro scripts that we run in certain test classes that are not unit tests because they need the full GUI. And what you saw here, the big speed, was that we implemented a feature. We can set a condition for each call that it is run in testing mode, which means it does not affect the database. It fakes internal database access where necessary and just replays in a way that it looks like as if it was run actually, but internally nothing is changed. So you can repeat the same sequence arbitrary times without needing to restore your database and or take care that something is ruined on other ways. So what we finally come to is that we have a situation by defining call types and calls and arguments, we have a well-defined API for our whole application. So in the meantime, we obey the rule internally. Everything that is a defined behavior of the application is wrapped into a typed call that is subject to that command editor. That is the internal base. Of course, that is not the way how the application should be driven only. So that is a point I come back to immediately. But the main idea is we have a well-defined behavior. We have defined types for all semantics that are part of the application and important. And we can support it. We can use that API. In the list you see here, auto-completed input. We can even paste input, which is a different behavior because the parser does not auto-complete something if you paste a full command string. And of course, we can replay that input. So we could even do things like Gishe showed us yesterday with the fuzzy testing, like injecting a lot of random strings and looking if it still behaves well. Then the same thing for pasted input offers a very big possibility that will be used in the near future, that is speech recognition and taking the recognized tokens by the speech recognition as input for our commands. So you can sit there and say document create, name equals, and it will work easily because the system will automatically recognize every problem. Then, of course, input as JSON, which allows programmed control of the application finally. And we have, through our precise structure that is well layered, we have, of course, different testing layers. We can test the parsing of complex constructs that are specific with different value types. We can control the value assignments. Do we really create the typed values that we expect and all that kind of stuff? And finally, the high-level test runs where I showed you one of. And the basis of all this is finally that evolved for us after some time. Well, we have everything well defined, and we are forced to do it well defined, and that makes a big difference compared to what we had earlier, like when creating a document. Okay, we looked for some single selection. Is there a folder selected? Then we think we are the first parent below that folder or the last. If there's another document selected, we think, okay, should we do it before or behind? And all those implicit decisions are now made explicit because we have placement types. And I was coming back, I announced to come back to where is the GUI? Because a normal application, the users do not accept typing everything in like the way I showed you. We want to use our call executions in a way that they can be configured for the way how we want to really use it in the application. So we will extend our current implementation by different ways to deal with command modes. One of the most important one to create templates of given commands, and then of course it's very easy to wrap those templates into something that can be shown in a GUI. And one interesting thing below is that is currently hardwired in our application. We have a concept of a focus item that is an internal variable. And if you have something like what we see here, that is a draft document that has been created and not saved, it's very easy to have 5 different actions associated with that item. One is save, obviously, one is get a file for that document, one is release it, and one is cancel it, and one is for help. And that actions are finally thought and expected to come from within our different command modes as prepared activities, just issuing commands. So now I'm on my last slide, and where do we want to go with that? So at the moment, we have about more than 50 calls implemented, but of course we are expecting several hundreds of them because, as I wrote, everything should be a call. And the most important thing is we believe that there is no real way to have a unique GUI for every kind of use case. There are users that only rarely want to open some documents and create some new documents and save them. They need a different GUI than power users setting up a new project where you need a complete folder hierarchy filled with templates for important things that have to be provided as information in that project for the very startup. So think of a hierarchy of 30 folders and 50 documents that will have to be created. And here the command editor or the command-driven feature can really provide you a big improvement in preparing, letting people prepare their work by writing down commands, selecting them, guided or whatever way, and they can even use a mode we call dry runs. So if you set up a new project, it's annoying if you try to want to repeat a structure and it's the wrong one afterwards. You saw okay, and then you have to delete 10 folders and 20 documents and issue other ones again. So we can provide a way to run the commands in the testing mode. Then you see, okay, it looks like I wanted to have it. Can even look at the document contents that were there, but they are not in the database yet. And that is an impressive way to provide a wide range of control that you can give to the people for the way how it is best for their current task. And what we now have from the implementation side is a technical base that is already in production quality. And what we finally want to reach is a point where we do not focus on certain simple specific features, but we really are targeting to something that makes the functionality emerge by the way how people learn to use the system, and that includes a lot of work that has to be done additionally, like providing pre-configured sample scenarios, and of course providing sample scenarios for typical actions like create a new Word document and things like that, already accessible via menus and other GUI elements that the users like to have. So that is the way how we want to extend our command line environment finally in the documentation management system. Thanks for your attention. So we are 2 minutes over time, but if there are questions.
So just to understand the application, so you use it for testing and also maybe in the future to configure new user interfaces. But currently you have an application which is already a web or a client, a fat client application.
It's a fat client, yes.
Okay. And you now use it mainly for testing, and maybe you can also give the user the ability to record macros which can be replayed and to use it for testing. Okay, thank you.
Very nice solution. It makes me remember a lot of the command line in tools like AutoCAD, for example. And
Exactly, yeah, that is a mirror of that, because for so many functionality you cannot deal with a simple GUI.
yes, and well, I have seen that you have integrated features to simplify the writing of the commands. My question is, there is also or the idea to integrate gestures also with for example, if I add a property of a document, if I can go and check it up with the mouse and combining the gestures of the keyboard and the mouse, let's say.
We can also combine several channels for input, and the whole command layer is totally configured outside of the application. So it is connected from database. So the whole command representation definition is in the database, and the connection is via some specific keys that have to match, so that you internally find the calls, and the names of the variables, of course, are connected. But we are open to a wide variety, so it's intentionally not as less hardwired as possible. Pavel? Last call.
I have no question. It's a note. The commands can be translated to different languages.
Yeah, that's. I suppose that that was clear, but nice to mention. We can even display check names for call types, which is very complicated. Thank you.